At 0201 hours local time, a 440-pound structural warhead came down onto the southern support connection of a railway bridge over the North Crimean Canal at better than 100 miles an hour. The concrete did not shatter. The force drove into the line carrying the bridge's weight, and the steel inside it folded outward. 2 seconds later, a second drone struck the deck section beside it, and the arithmetic holding that span in the air stopped working. The whole section came down at once. A column of pulverized concrete and black smoke climbed roughly 400 feet above the canal, visible from 7 miles out in the dark. 12 seconds earlier, a loaded Russian logistics train had been sitting on that span. The drones that did it flew 75 miles to get there, at 165 feet, carrying warheads between 230 and 440 pounds apiece. 8 launched that night, down 2 corridors against 1 target that could not move. The defense network guarding this crossing was handed 13 minutes and 41 seconds to stop all 8. It stopped 5. Against a bridge, 5 out of 8 is a loss. Rewind 14 minutes. At 0147, 3 FP-2s crossed the northern edge of occupied Crimea. They had been airborne 31 minutes. Nothing on the ground had registered them. Below them, the bridge was doing what it had done for years. Nothing remarkable. A rail span over a canal, the kind of crossing a train passes without anyone aboard noticing. What made it matter was everything that used it. Ammunition, fuel, and reinforcements moving through the peninsula all traveled this corridor on a schedule steady enough to set a watch by. In 3 years of war, nothing had ever put a hole in it. And 3 years of nothing happening teaches a garrison that nothing is going to happen. The operation did not begin that night. Weeks earlier, a Ukrainian Special Operations Resistance Network living inside occupied territory had started watching the crossing from rotating positions along the rail line. They never counted calibers or identified radar models. They logged rhythm, when the trains ran, how long a consist took to clear the span, when headlights moved along the service road, and when they went dark. No single report would have alarmed anyone who intercepted it. Together, across weeks, the fragments assembled into a timetable, and a timetable is a targeting product. Russia measured this bridge in shipments delivered. Ukraine measured it in minutes. And the 3 drones out in front at 0147, the ones already inside the radar's reach, they had not been launched to hit the bridge at all. They had been launched to die. The first thing that saw them was a Podlet K1. It is a low-altitude surveillance radar built for exactly this problem. A mast-mounted array turning through a full circle from 33 feet up, sensitive enough to register a radar cross-section of 1/10 of a square meter. 20 feet of wing, a propeller at the nose, a fuselage built around a demolition charge. On paper, the Podlet K1 could hold that target past 60 miles. On paper. Stand on a beach and watch a ship leave. It does not shrink into a dot and fade. It sinks. The hull goes first, then the superstructure, then the mast, and the ship is still there, the same size in clear air. What removed it was the water bending away underneath it. Radar works the same way, because radar travels in something close to a straight line and the planet does not. At 165 feet, the FP-2s were not hiding behind terrain or weather or jamming. They were hiding behind the curve of the Earth. 60 miles of specification collapsed to 22. The Podlet K1 was not blind. It was looking over the top of them until they climbed over the edge of the world and into its beam. 13 minutes and 41 seconds. That is what 22 miles buys against something moving at 100 miles an hour, and it is everything the defense of that bridge would ever get. The crew acquired the tracks and started the handoff to the shooters. That is not instant. A detection has to become a track, and a track has to become a firing solution in front of a different crew on a different vehicle who never saw any of it. Call it 2 to 3 minutes, and that is generous. By the time the alert reached the missile crews, the clock read under 11 minutes. 11 minutes in which the drones would cover another 18 miles, a quarter of the warning window gone to paperwork, and the fight had not started. The timing had worked. Because the 3 aircraft climbing into that radar beam were bait. 25 seconds behind them, on a second bearing angling in from the east, 5 more FP-2s were flying the same 165-foot profile toward the same span. 5 airframes carrying the structural warheads still below the curve, riding in the shadow of the alarm their own escorts had just set off. And 12 miles out from the bridge, something was already working on all 8 of them. It would not fire a single shot. That was the Pole-21, saturating the final approach corridor, and satellite navigation stopped being something the FP-2s could trust. Most shrugged it off. Inertial backup carried the heading, and the terminal camera was hunting a silhouette it already knew by shape. But the third bait drone had been drinking corrupted data since it entered the zone, and it was not being knocked down. It was being nudged. Turn a steering wheel half a degree on an empty highway and nothing happens. Nothing happens for a long time. Then the shoulder arrives. Half a degree of bearing error means nothing at the moment it occurs, and roughly 30 feet of lateral miss 12 miles later, against a bridge deck 33 feet wide. The Pole-21 never touched that airframe. It moved its aim and let geometry finish the job. Then the bait arrived over the Panzer S1. This was the system that actually defended the crossing. Short-range point defense, 12 ready missiles on the launcher, and a pair of 30mm cannons for anything that got past them. It is not a weak system. 5 seconds after the lead aircraft resolved on the tracking display, the crew fired a pair. 3 seconds of missile flight while the drone kept closing. The first round caught it, and the drone came apart in the dark. The second was already inside the engagement zone. A second and a half between salvos. Shift bearing, fire another pair, watch the rounds track out, another kill. The third, the one the Pole-21 had already walked off course, was drifting wide and no longer a threat to anything. The crew engaged it anyway, they could not know that. 2 more missiles went out after an aircraft that was never going to hit. 6 missiles in 40 seconds, 3 kills, a perfect performance by any evaluation anyone would ever write. And the launcher was down to 6 before the drones that mattered showed up. They showed up 25 seconds later, 5 of them, converging from a bearing 30 degrees off the first corridor. Now the problem changed shape. Each engagement runs a cycle. Acquire, lock, fire, assess, slew to the next, and it takes what it takes. The system could hold 4 tracks. There were 5 aircraft spreading apart as they came, each pulling the radar further from the last. One broke apart at medium range. The crew slewed to reacquire, and the geometry had already moved again. 10 missiles expended out of 12. The crew went to guns. 2.5 miles of effective reach, about 90 seconds of work at this closing speed. Another FP-2 came apart under cannon fire. 3 crossed the gun line. And on the bridge, the logistics train was still moving. Its cars were stretched across the attacked span, directly over the aim point, and the operators watching the electro-optical feed could see it rolling clear at 40 miles an hour. The warheads were locked to the structure underneath them. Once an FP-2 tips into its final dive, the decision is already made. There is no abort. Nobody reached for one. The drones held their course. The train held its speed. For a few seconds, the two overlapped. Warheads descending toward concrete that still had a train standing on it and no way left to change either fact. Then the gap opened. 8 seconds, 10. The last flat car rolled off the deck and kept going south into the dark, and the span behind it was empty. The first warhead struck the southern support connection. 200 pounds of high explosive against reinforced concrete does not produce the clean puncture people expect. The energy went into the load path, the line of force that carries a bridge's weight down through its supports into the ground, and split it. Nothing collapsed. The span still stood, doing its job with a structure that no longer added up. 2 seconds later, the second FP-2 hit the adjacent deck section, and the remaining supports were asked to carry more than they could. An entire section came down at once, not tipped, not sagged. It went as one piece, everything the span was built from arriving in the canal in the same second. Water went up in a wall. Pulverized concrete followed, a gray column climbing into the darkness with black smoke twisting through it, 400 feet over the water and visible 7 miles out. The third drone struck the rail approach on the near bank, severing the track and throwing sleepers across the embankment. 12 seconds earlier, a loaded train had been rolling over that exact stretch of steel. What was left was a gap over the water, a torn stub of deck gripping the far abutment, and 2 rails that ran out and ended. Counted honestly, 5 of 8 drones failed. The Panzer S1 killed 4. The Pole-21 accounted for the fifth without firing anything. A 62% intercept rate against a saturating night attack. There is not a defense evaluation on Earth that would call that a failure. 3 warheads got through. A bridge has no evasive maneuver. It cannot break contact. It cannot survive by being somewhere else. It stands where it is and absorbs everything that reaches it. Against a target like that, an interception rate is not a score. It is a subtraction problem, and the only number that matters is what is left over. 3 was enough. 1 span down, the rail cut, the crossing dead, then it went quiet. By then, the launch element had broken down and moved. The firing site empty before the smoke over the bridge finished rising. Somewhere along the corridor, in a position they had used for weeks, the resistance cell was still watching. They were not watching the bridge. 8 drones for 1 railway span was more than enough, and the planners knew it before the first aircraft left the ground. The operation was never sized for the bridge. It was sized for what Russia would send to fix it. Russia did what any army does when a rail line goes down. It sent the machines. By the following night, a repair vehicle was parked beside the severed track. Boom extended into the work zone, a support vehicle 100 feet behind it. Floodlights, generators, men working a gap in a bridge less than 24 hours after 8 drones came through it. The resistance cell's report was 1 line long. It was enough. 6 FP-2s were already 45 minutes into their flight, launched on a corridor 30 degrees east of the one the first attack had used. This time, the defense was better. Genuinely better. The Podlet K-1 picked them up faster and classified them tighter. The Pole-21 came up earlier. The Panzer S-1 had been reloaded to a full 12 and repositioned to cover the bearing the first attack came down, and it was tracking before the lead aircraft crossed the 20-mile mark. 2 bait drones led the formation. The crew killed both cleanly, exactly the way the manual reads. 30 seconds later, the second group arrived from a heading nobody had covered. The launcher needed 8 seconds to slew onto the new bearing. 8 seconds is nothing. 8 seconds is also 430 feet of closure, and it was the 8 seconds the remaining drones spent crossing into the inner zone. 1 came apart at medium range. A second had sat inside Pole-21 coverage 3 miles longer than any aircraft the night before, and the accumulated error had not bent its aim. It had erased it. The camera could no longer find the bridge at all. That drone struck open ground 600 feet short. 4 of 6 stopped, 67%, better than night 1. The last 2 kept coming. The first tore out a surviving connection between the collapsed section and the deck still standing, and steel that had held since the previous night let go. The second went for the rail, its camera filled with the work zone. The cut track, the floodlights, the repair vehicle sitting dead center in the aim point with its boom extended and its hydraulic outriggers locked down into the ballast. The support vehicle was already reversing. It got clear. The machine that mattered could not move. It had spent the last hour turning itself into part of the ground. The warhead came down on the same 50 feet of track the first wave had opened, and the blast swept the 20-odd feet of open ground to the vehicle beside it. Fragments of concrete and steel went through the cabin and engine housing. Hydraulic fluid and diesel found the heat. A column of black smoke climbed off the burning machine and stood over the worksite while the track underneath it split for the second time in 2 nights. The remaining men fell back from the track. Whatever schedule Russia had written for reopening this line was now a blank page. Count the whole thing. 14 FP-2s at somewhere around $50,000 each. Call it $700,000 in aircraft that were never coming home. In exchange, a span in the water, the section beside it cracked and unusable. The track opened twice on 2 different nights, 3/4 of the attacked structure down or unsafe, and the 1 machine sent to repair it burned down beside the rail it came to fix. The defense killed 9 of 14, 64%. Put that in a report and nobody gets fired. The Panzer S-1 shot down 7 over 2 nights, the Pole-21 walked 2 more into empty ground, and both did roughly what they were built to do. They still lost the bridge. Night 1 they ran out of magazine. Night 2 they ran out of bearing. Neither failure was incompetence, and that is the part worth sitting with. Against something that stands still and absorbs whatever reaches it, defending well and defending enough are 2 different problems. 12 missiles is a finite number. A rail span is a finite structure. Whichever runs out first decides who owns the corridor. Russia spent 12 missiles a night, a repair crew, and a machine it cannot easily replace and still has to send another one. Into the same gap, under the same sky, watched by the same people who logged the first timetable. The launcher will be resupplied. It will be moved to a new bearing and told to watch a different piece of sky, and that is a process measured in days. The people who spent weeks writing down when the trains ran are still out there. They were never in a hurry. If you want more breakdowns like this one, subscribe. And tell me in the comments, is a 64% intercept rate a success when the thing you're protecting only has to be hit once?